I run a social platform called Slenky. Slenky's been built on the premise that most young people aren't really aware of how to connect their passion with opportunities. So I use social media and mobile and content to kind of, make certain sectors more accessible to young people, and inspire them really. That old saying of you can't be what you can't see, I think really does ring true, particularly amongst young women and minorities, that unless they see people like you and Adrian who've had successful careers and building successful careers as commercial pilots, they perhaps can't see themselves in that same role. So Slenky has been set up with that in mind. How do we get young people to be able to use their devices to be able to connect with brands and businesses that actually harbor their dreams? So I'm really grateful to you guys for giving up some time. I want to capture your stories individually of kind of how you decided, how you thought, what switched the light bulb on for you at an early age, what helped you decide that airlines and commercial piloting was your thing.
From a kid, I was always around aircraft because my dad had a private pilot's license. So once summertime came, we always used to go up flying. And on the weekend, we'd always sit at home playing Flight Simulator and flying remote controlled aircraft. I think for me, the biggest thing was when I got to about 15 years old, my dad asked me, what do you want to do when you're older? And I said to him, I'd love to be a pilot. So he asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And for my birthday, he actually got me a trial lesson. So I went up on a trial lesson with a proper instructor to go flying. And from then I said, yeah, that is definitely what I want to do.
So you had your dad to look at as a role model.
Yeah, he was kind of a role model. So he would, not only did he, because he had a private pilot's license, he would take us up, but on the weekends, we would play Flight Simulator and he would show us how to fly a plane on the computer. And we'd have little challenges between, I've got an older brother, so it would be me, him, and my older brother. And we'd see who could fly the best on Flight Simulator. And always 9 times out of 10, my brother was always better than me, but it was a good laugh and I always enjoyed it. So when I got older enough, my dad said to me, do you want to go for it? And I said, yeah, let's try it. So I went full steam ahead and didn't look back.
For me, which just shows how old I am, it goes back to the 1970s, literally 1970. I think the first trigger may have been things like Thunderbirds and Lost in Space, but it was the Apollo missions to the moon, Apollo 11. I mean, even on my wall back here, I've got Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins on my wall. They were the spark, basically. My dad came over to the United Kingdom in 1956 as a mechanical engineer, worked for Hoover's as a draftsman, and then decided to open up his own travel agency, Rainbow Travel. And we used to go on holiday twice a year. So in the summer, we'd go to Europe. In the winter, we'd go to Barbados. And I think it was the Barbados flight where we were on, I remember DC-8. And it was coming back in the middle of the night. Dad took me up on the flight deck. I think that was back in 1971. And you had, and bear in mind, I was probably 6, going on 7 years old at the time. So I was quite small when I walked into that flight deck, and I saw the captain, first officer, flight engineer, navigator, and I was looking outside the window and all I could see was the night sky and stars, basically. And I thought, that looks like space, So I thought maybe being an astronaut is a bit too far-fetched, but the next thing closest to the stars for me was being an airline pilot. And then it literally took off from there.
Aaron, you had a moment as well in your maybe earlier years where you realized that this actually is something you were quite passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit more, or a little bit of how that dawned on you?
Yeah, so for me, from a kid, I was always around aircraft because my dad had a private pilot's license. So once summertime came, we always used to go up flying. And on the weekend, we'd always sit at home playing Flight Simulator and flying remote controlled aircraft. So
how old were you then?
Well, going up with him is actually...
When you first remember going up with your dad?
Oh, I don't know, a toddler. But I remember, well, where I eventually went and learned to fly was the same place I used to go with my dad to go flying. And it was always like a second home to me. I always remembered it. So when I then eventually went there, it was no difference to meeting up with my old friends and stuff, because I knew most people there. However, I think for me, the biggest thing was when I got to about 15 years old, my dad asked me, what do you want to do when you're older? And I said to him, I'd love to be a pilot. So he asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and for my birthday, he actually got me a trial lesson. So I went up on a trial lesson with a proper instructor to go flying. And from then I said, yeah, that is definitely what I want to do.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in East London.
Okay. And Adrian? It's a loaded question here, really.
Well, you grew up with you, didn't I? Wembley, where you are now. See the stadium behind you. That is my roots, basically. Even though my family originated from Barbados, my Barbados is London. That's all I know, basically. And I used to think London was the epicenter of the whole universe at the time. Don't now, but so yeah, grew up with, went to school with you in Chalkhill. Then we later Preston Manor High School. Some of the best years of my life, really. Yeah.
We discovered, Aaron, that you had this passion for flight. You managed to get your lesson, some training in through your gift from your father. What happened next?
So after that, I had the trial lesson when I was 15 and confirmed that it was something I wanted to do. So at college, I picked to study maths, physics, and geography. And that was purely because at the time, everywhere you read online to be a pilot, it always said you didn't have to go to uni. However, those subjects, well, not necessarily geography, but maths and physics are desirable subjects to have under your belt. So I chose to study them at A level. And then I sat down with my parents and they said, you need a plan B if things don't go to plan. So I chose to go to uni. So I went and studied air transport operations at university. And then during my first year at uni, I then started to learn to fly at the same time. So I wasn't driving at the time. So my dad would drop me to flying school in the morning before he started work. I'd do a lesson in the morning, then I'll sit and study the ground school. And then from there, I'd then do another lesson in the afternoon. When my dad finished work, he'd then come to the flying school and pick me up, then take me back home.
So let me get sorted out around this. You were living in East London?
Yep.
Where was the flying school?
Just outside of London in Essex, a place called Stapleford.
And where was your dad working?
He was working in Gants Hill, which is like 20 minutes down the road.
While you were going to flying school, was there a moment that you looked around you and felt, maybe this isn't me, or do I fit in? Or did you question yourself at any time based upon perception, self-perception, or identity of the group of people who were training? Yeah,
definitely. Like, when you first go there and you start sitting the lessons and stuff, you always think to yourself, am I good enough to be here? And, am I going to reach the required grade to progress? And no matter what you do in life, anything, you always doubt yourself. But my parents were always reassuring that no matter what you do, son, as long as you're true to yourself, regardless what result you get, as long as you put the effort in, you can't be upset with yourself. So I just persevered and pushed on. And as exam by exam came by and I managed to jump through the hoops, you then naturally build up a bit of momentum and you believe in yourself and you just don't look back and off you go, But yeah, definitely when you first walk in, you think to yourself, whoa, am I going to be able to do this? But
there's a challenge for a lot of people, young women and people from minorities of fitting in, and part of that first challenge you get is, you tend to look around in some of the more elite, or should we say more exclusive careers, and you don't see an awful lot of people who look like you. And for many people, that tends to push them away or knock their confidence. Again, that saying you can't be what you can't see tends to ring true for a lot of young people. Did you have any moments like that where you really felt as though I'm a bit of an outsider, an outlier here?
Where the first flying school I went, where I did the majority of my training, my first instructor, he was actually he was an ethnic minority himself. So, that, to be fair, yeah, going there, race and ethnics or whatever, how you look at yourself and the other people in the room, never really came into it. I was kind of more tunnel vision of, I'm here to fly a plane, I'm here to learn, I don't care about anything else. And plus, because I'd already been there so much as a child, I knew so many people there, so I was already comfortable. So it was never an issue.
No question of how old you are now?
26.
26, flying worldwide as a commercial pilot.
Yeah.
Even I'm impressed with that. He's way ahead of me when I was his age, because I was on the 737-200, which was a steam-driven airplane, basically, compared to what he's doing. So, yeah, Aaron's at a much advanced stage than I was.
So let's look at that then, Adrian, you know. So on leaving school, because I remember in the sixth form you started your flying lessons, but on leaving school, what happened next? You know, what was that next step that took you nearer towards your dream?
So after leaving, I didn't really want to go to university or polytechnic as it was back then. And the culture is not like it is now. You know, now it's, why aren't you going to university? Are you mad? So for me, my spark, I just wanted to get into flying as soon as I possibly could. And you're quite right. In sixth form, I went out to Miami to learn to fly. Cessna 152s and 172s and a Piper Seneca, basically. And I had a brilliant time. But the downside to doing that is I was doing an American course, and a federal aviation course. And what that meant is that when I came back to the UK, the British Civil Aviation Authority just wouldn't recognize, I mean, the Americans make the planes, but at the time, the British felt they were the best at flying the planes in the world. And so, you know, the French are the same as well. So I literally had to start again after leaving school. So I went from Miami to Perth in Scotland. I was going to go to Oxford, but Scotland was like at the time £9,000 cheaper. And that made a huge difference. But I'm glad I did, because the weather up in Scotland was always awful, basically. And if you can fly in Scotland, you can fly anywhere in the world. And that was really the whole point of that.
I want to know a little bit more about how you would advise young people to follow this passion, were it flying or other passions. And I think the best person really to put some of those questions to you would be Amelia rather than me. So if I could ask you, Amelia, to unmute, and perhaps we could dig a little bit into your own passions firstly, and you know, who you are and, you know, why you decided this is the field for you. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself to start with.
Well, I've always wanted to be a pilot. I think I've always been like on different holidays, like when I was younger and stuff like that. And I too am also like Asian origin. So when I was younger, we moved to Barbados for a year. I think that like kind of like set like the importance of like flight for me. Because for me, it wasn't just like going on holiday or anything like that. It was actually going home, going to see my family, going to do all these different like adventures. And so I really wanted to, you know, do that to other people and like help them.
I can't say I've seen an awful lot of young black female pilots in the UK. Adrian and I talked about this a little while ago, where, you know, in Africa, Caribbean and the States, you know, there's a lot of imagery that young women can aspire to and can identify with. But perhaps you guys could tell me a little more about the state of play in the UK.
Well, from my point of view, I've seen black female American pilots, Ethiopian pilots, but Amelia, if she gets to become a pilot, and this is going to sound shocking, I am going to literally bow down in total respect to her, because she'll be the first black British female pilot that I have seen in my career.
Amelia, I imagine you've looked at a few of these airlines out of passing interest, or is there a more focused interest in applying to some of these airlines, see if they've got training schemes or anything of the sort?
I honestly really don't mind. I just want to fly. Like, I just want to fly planes. Like, I don't really care which airline.
Can I just, before I let you go, I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask. One is, and Aaron, you've mentioned it, Adrian, you've mentioned it, the younger generation now have got access to tools, information that we didn't have perhaps when we were younger. Aaron, you mentioned flight simulators, and Adrian, I know you also use simulators. Is there any advice you could give Amelia, or direct her to anything that she could use casually at home and upgrade her learning?
I would say 100% flight simulator, because it's so realistic now. So she can fly anything from a Cessna 152 to just learn the basics. There's no substitute for the real thing, but to get her scan going, basically. Or she can fly a 737 where every switch and dial works. And not only does everything work, but she could simulate engine failures or engine fires or hydraulic problems. And what would she do, basically?
But also, back in my day, well, when I was learning, my dad used to have VCRs. And on these VCR tapes, you'd have these companies that would record a sector of a flight in a proper commercial airliner, and you'd watch the pilots operate. And just by sitting there and watching them do their thing, it's remarkable how much you can actually learn from it. So translating that to today's time, on YouTube, there's definitely loads of videos where you can actually watch a crew operate a flight together. And just by sitting there watching that, you'll see how pilots interact with one another. Something that's very important in aviation is crew resource management, how we get the best out of each other, how we interact with the other people, like cabin crew, ground staff. You get to see all of that happening in these videos, and now it's all on YouTube. You can sit there and get a great insight into what's to come for Amelia.
I'm gonna ask, like, how did you all like deal with like the stress of like doing like all of this? Because I felt like really like I felt like I couldn't do it, but I feel like I can't at the same time. Like, it feels off limits.
As in, when you were taking the lesson flying, you thought it was hard, or?
No, not that. As in, like, I just thought that even like studying it, because like when like I would talk to people about, oh yeah, I want to be a pilot, they'd give you like a strange look and go, what, you really? Like, and I
would say I've had all that. I'm a male. I've had all of that. You know what? You be a pilot, and I've had, well, how many black pilots have you seen? You're 17, I was 15 at the time, and you start to think, well, maybe it's a pipe dream. It's not, especially in 21st century Britain, basically. You're in a good time at the moment. In fact, you're in a better time than when I was your age, I would say that. So if you've got the drive, you will be a pilot for any of the major airlines, no question.
If you turn up on day one and you have the passion to want to be a pilot, that's all the instructor or recruiter or fellow colleague cares about, not where you come from or who you are. It's purely, do you love flying and can you do the job?